Hi, Meti. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So we have a great opportunity today to chat about leadership and intergenerational leadership, and maybe talk a little bit about World YWCA Day and also the global youth mobilization that World YWCA is a part of, and that you and I are both board members of. So maybe we could start with talking about when we first met each other, and remembering how and when we met each other, and some of the impressions we had of each other as both being leaders of within the YWCA, but not knowing each other until that moment. Although I do believe I had heard about you, but I'm not sure about that, but I think so. So anyway, maybe we can start there. Go back to our meet and greet story. So why don't you start?
Sure. If I remember correctly, I think we met in 2019, right before the World Council, if a month or so before the World Council.
Mhm.
And you were here, you were in Ethiopia visiting for a meeting or something, and you came to see our office,
Mhm.
uh, located in the central city. And yeah, we were very prepared. We wanted to impress you, and you were with Ida, who's also a member of the who was a member of the Worldwide staff.
Mhm.
And yeah, we did different presentations, and I think this thing that stuck with me most was your response to the presentations that we did, because our Y movement here operates a bit more differently than most YWC organizations and associations. So I was very surprised with how you were happy with that and how you wanted the direction to go in that way, I guess, in some ways. And you were impressed with the work that we were doing. And that was my first impression, of course. And also the way you were communicating with Ida, and I could see that there was a certain closeness and like the freedom to speak, because there is an age gap and there is a leadership gap as well. But yeah, that tells a lot about a person, especially about a leader and the way that they treat their staff. And yeah, I think that was my first impression. What did you think? I really want to know.
Yeah. Well, I was so excited. First of all, you all really welcomed Aida and I when we were at the meeting, um, and we were so excited to have found time to go to the office. And I can remember getting out of the cab. And I think Lydia had got us there, and she was great, and she answered all the millions of questions we asked on the way there. And then I remember being greeted and then learning so much about the work of YWCA Ethiopia, and absolutely being inspired, not just by the story of revitalization of YWCA Ethiopia, but to see um, a number of team members that had prepared and had really wanted to share very openly the challenges and opportunities and successes of YWCA Ethiopia. And I loved seeing the varied ages, not only that day when we first met, but also when we all had dinner together one night. I thought this is the way to do it. I remember being really impressed by seeing how naturally YWCA Ethiopia was already co-designing with youth. And that it was just inspiring. And then the presentations were great, and you stuck out. I mean, I was like, Meti, yeah, I've heard that name, and I had just recently, and then we got to meet, and you were incredibly poised and confident, and you had a lot to say, and I really appreciated that. I think everyone on the team showed was awesome. And I also felt a real pull toward your poise and your candor. Yeah, your poise and your candor. So, and then when we were planning for the YWCA event in South Africa, and there was a panel, and I was like, what about Meti? What about Meti? She'd be great. Um, And yeah, I feel like we've slowly gotten to know each other. And then when the global youth mobilization with WHO and the big 6 organizations and United Nations Foundation came up late last year, the COVID response project was coming together, and a decision was made to have varied age representation on the board. As I told you when I asked you if you'd be willing to serve on the board, a main reason was because I felt like you would speak your mind openly when you felt like there was something that needed to be said, and that was exciting.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That really means a lot. Coming from you, from someone I really respect as a leader and someone who genuinely believes in intergenerational leadership. So yeah, thank you for your leadership and for being a sort of mentor to me as well throughout the past few months. So yeah.
Yeah.
Leading up to that.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, just I enjoyed hearing. Thanks for what you said as well. Anyway, so what were you saying?
I was just going to ask you what inspires you in a leader.
Yeah, I thought about that a lot, and actually, as I was speaking, I thought about it because it was named as a possible topic we could discuss. But as I was sharing with you about the impression that you made so quickly on me, and I said it's because you are poised and candid. I was thinking to myself, those are definitely things I'm drawn to in a leader. And by poised, I mean centered, grounded, confident. And also I love direct communication. I really appreciate that in a leader. And I think sometimes in leadership roles, we're almost trained to move away from honesty and transparency. We can find ourselves spinning things or framing things or reframing things for specific audiences, which is an advantage, but then it can go sideways pretty quickly, I think, too, with leaders, where it just becomes a way of communicating. And it is a huge fear of mine that I would lose my center or my authenticity or my honesty with myself. So I really value those things in others. And I also, for leaders that I really appreciate, they typically are confident but humble, and really have a vision to serve with love, like their motivation behind why they do what they do, or why they want to be in a leadership role is from a place of love and serving. Sounds corny, but it's how I feel. How about you? What do you find you look for or respect or admire in leaders?
I completely agree with most of what you said, but I also appreciate loyalty because as a leader, it's very easy to be drawn to certain things and to certain ideals, and it's easy to be pulled in different directions. And being loyal to oneself and being loyal to teams and being loyal to, for instance, how you've been with the YWCA movement for over 20 years now. That's loyalty. And serving that amount of time and with passion and with dignity, that's something I respect in a leader. And I think caring, because we forget sometimes that we're trained in leadership to be very logical and analytical, but I believe that it's emotions that make us stronger and that make us make better decisions. It's thinking with both our minds and our hearts. And I appreciate leaders who know how to balance both. I think that's something that everybody goes through, because there's always going to be times when we have to decide on what's bigger. But when it's with movements like the YWCA, it makes it easier and harder at the same time to make these decisions, because we're not working for personal gain or for anything really. It's just more because we believe in the cause. It's because it's about serving communities, and it's about giving back to something that has put in so much time and effort and resources into us. So I think in those moments, it's very funny that you mentioned this, because I was going through this just a few months ago when I had to go back to school and I needed to make a few changes. And
Mhm.
yeah, it was not easy to decide, of course, but it depends on how passionate we are about certain things and how much we care about it and how much we value it, of course.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it's also about personal growth, and we have to learn how to be loyal to the cause, but at the same time, we have to be loyal to ourselves first. And that's when we believe in personal growth and personal development and growing ourselves people. Because there's no point in us being in some place if we're not contributing something or more value to what there already is. So if I ever see myself as being just there, I always decide to step back.
Yeah.
But if it's something that I know that I can add more value to, and then that's when I'm more stubborn. So yeah.
Ah. I have found through the years, because yeah, I have been with the YWCA global movement for 20 years, but I've been in small communities, big cities, different roles. And that is one thing that's great about the YWCA, is because we're a global movement, and because we're in so many communities and we respond to the unique needs of different communities. And because I had the privilege of being able to plan for and make kind of life change adaptations, I have been able to navigate through within the YWCA system in a way that's kind of unusual these days, and to really stay centered on just the powerful mission of
Mm.
YWCA. But to your point, like, I certainly have had many ebbs and flows and points where I realized that what I was doing, maybe I wasn't bringing my full self to, or I was no longer the right fit for that job. And it's been other YWCA leaders and others, but also YWCA leaders that I've been able to lean on to say, tell me what you think. This is what I'm thinking. I need some honest feedback. You know, and to kind of download a bunch of my thoughts and feelings and observations, and then to hear back from them. It's a really powerful part, I think, of the YWCA sisterhood, to be able to develop these networks. And so far, they followed me everywhere. And mentorship, intergenerational mentorship, is a huge part of my leadership story in the YWCA. Do you feel that? Do you feel that way? Do you feel like the intergenerational leadership is something that has been, a positive force, or a real, to propel your growth and your opportunities?
I joined the Y movement when I was still in high school and when I was trying to figure out what to do. And it has definitely shaped a lot of my life, because I was in the middle of applying for colleges in different countries, and I had everything planned out for the next 10 years. Everything in my life was just genuinely planned out to what I would learn, to what I would do. And then I started volunteering at the YWCA, and then I saw that there was more purpose and there was something that was missing from everything in my plans. So yeah, because of the mentorship that I had from our former general secretary and our current general secretary, we're both there at the time, it completely shaped the way that I was thinking, because I always thought about making my life better and making something for myself, but I've never seen it from the perspective of an outside. I'm seeing it from a community level, how much more good that I could do by being here, by just my existence alone. And that showed me because of the YWCA and the work that we were doing, and because I had to go into communities that were not in very good, to travel to different areas of my country, and it showed me that I could not come back with an education from somewhere else and try to drive change, because I had to come from here. I had to be shaped from here, and I had to be shaped by my experiences here for me to be a vital part of change.
I find it fascinating to go back. So we have these incredible archives here in Geneva, and you can go back to paper handwritten, typewritten minutes from World YWCA meetings that have occurred all around the world for over a century. And this idea of intergenerational leadership is just a fundamental part of intersectionality and intergenerational leadership, which are now very kind of mainstream conversations in the women's rights movement and human rights movement, have really been germane or centered for YWCA for over a century. So I read these minutes, and they give me perspective, because there are some days when I think, oh, this idea of intergenerational leadership and walking our talk and doing it right, it's never going to happen. And I'll very much get kind of hung up on a story I hear from a young woman leader, or maybe a message that I get that I just can see that we still have a long way to go. Or maybe sometimes I do something and I think I just did what I don't want to be doing around undermining the power of intergenerational leadership. But most days, I feel very confident that the World YWCA, we will keep driving the conversation and actually can serve as experts with our other networks and within our own network to hold ourselves accountable for, again, all the power of intergenerational leadership. And I mentioned the minutes from old meetings, and whether it was 22 or 100 years ago, because it tells me this is just an ongoing journey, right? This idea of centering and very intentionally leveraging and getting behind the force that is young women leaders is a practice, something that needs to be practiced and adapted to as technology changes, as social norms change, as political systems regress and progress. We have to keep walking the talk and practicing. Yeah. I mean, you and I have had a number of experiences recently with the board that we serve on, and seeing a lot of really dedicated, compassionate people that identify as young leaders and then don't identify as young leaders, all trying to center the leadership of youth, and having successes and then having failures. I'd love to have your opinion on, I have heard probably over the last year, more so as World YWCA, as we've really been even more very intentionally implementing our goal 2035 of millions of young women transforming power structures toward gender equality and justice. The more we've done that, and the more we've engaged with youth, and the more that's kind of just becoming part of how we live and breathe. I have heard from especially elder, and I would say not middle-aged, but elder YWCA leaders that are really struggling with finding their place within the work we do and centering youth and youth engagement, and real powerhouse leaders from the past. Some have retired, some are still doing work on a volunteer basis or even a paid basis, but not with the YWCA. And I can really hear insecurity and loss and mourning in their voice, as if there's no place for them. What would you say to them?
I strongly believe that each generation at a fundamental level has to want better for the next one. It's a given. We have to want something better, because I don't think we would be working this hard to achieve gender equality if we wanted our great-grandchildren to also fight for gender equality. So for these issues specifically, we have to understand that power has been in the hands of people that were not, and this is a very honest comment, it's been in the hands of people that are not going to live long enough to actually see those consequences. And sometimes those consequences, we're paying for them, as you can see, for climate change, and of course with gender equality as well. Decisions were made for the next generation and the generation after that by people who are not going to be there to see those consequences. And I think it's important to involve people, to involve these amazing generational leaders into the conversation to involve them in mentorship places. But it's also important to see the wisdom in young leaders and to appreciate that and to support that, because it's like I said, we're all here for a very limited amount of time, and we have to at least do our part while we're still here, and that has to do with wanting better for the next generation. And if that's what we want, we have to be able to leave the seat and to give it to the next person, but while still being there and while still being supportive, because it is very overwhelming at times. And yeah, that is my very, very honest opinion on the matter.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about my job as General Secretary of the World YWCA, and while I'm not in the elder category, that very esteemed category yet, I'm still, I'm no longer a young woman, and I think, so how far do we take the walking the talk, and what does it look like, and how might I engender stepping away in order for someone much younger than me to be able to have the privilege like I do to do the type of work that I do. And it's an interesting conversation about letting go and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And then I start to think about how to, again, is this an opportunity to develop a practice that's not either or, but that's intergenerational. That we haven't envisioned yet, or that is happening somewhere else but hasn't been adopted in this world right now that we live in, but that's really transformative. Yeah. Letting go. It's a powerful concept.
I completely agree.
Yeah. And so worldwide, so it's great to have been asked to have this conversation with you, and it seems it is a really neat opportunity, again, because we have our World YWCA Day this year focused on the pioneers, activists, amazing leaders of the YWCA movement, including young leaders, or leaders that were once young and no longer are young. And then also our global youth mobilization, really young leaders being those that design and implement and lead relevant responses to the impact of the COVID pandemic on their very generation. What comes to mind when you think about the intersection of the COVID-19 response and then and the World YWCA's focus on young women leaders?
I think both things go hand in hand. I think we've seen from the pandemic that the world can change in such an instant, and it has, and it can be scary, but it's also shown us, I like to focus on positive things for most of it. And I think the one positive thing that's come out of COVID is that it's shown us that young people can be leaders and can be part of a huge driving force for actual real world change. I say this because I've seen it, so it's very hard to explain. As soon as the pandemic hit, everybody had to go into lockdown restrictions, and especially elder people were very affected because, as you know, our economically we're not very strong, so we couldn't do strong lockdown restrictions, but we did close schools, and there was some work was closed as well. But these elders, they had nobody to support them or nobody to provide for them, and they were literally starving. That was the level of what was going on. But young people from different communities were standing up, and they were doing donations and drives and trying to get food everywhere and trying to get necessary items everywhere. And that showed true compassion and leadership. It showed that leadership is not something that you teach, it's something that you can see. It just happens in some areas. And that's just one example of all the good that has been done because of this pandemic and how closer that it has brought us. And it has also taught us that there is no point in us arguing about leadership and about different generations, that there is a point in us actually trying to bring all generations together despite age and despite gender and despite everything else to just come together and try to work together on everything. And yeah, I think that's a huge lesson, and that's something that corresponds with both those works in a way. It's about finally coming together as a world and trying to actually do the best that we can out of a very, very horrible situation. How about you? How do you feel about this?
Well, as a student of history, well, I mean, like an amateur student of history, but I try to, relative to others, I find that I have some grasp on history. I mean, history shows us that many, if not majority, and I'm sure someone could tear apart anything I'm saying, but there's no doubt that throughout history in every region of the world, it's actually been young individuals. So, and at YWCA, we say young as 30 and under, who have led revolution and transformative change and have led anti-oppressive work and have been willing to stick with something over a period of time in order for a change to happen, or have been willing to take risks in a way that perhaps other generations, when other age groups maybe let go of risk taking at some point for good reason, maybe not. So I think with COVID, I guess I think two things. One is that I can very easily see that pattern playing out, but also to the point that we know originally this project was called Generation Disrupted, and that was really acknowledging that we now have a generation of youth where the typical trajectory worldwide has been disrupted, has been interrupted, has been impacted in a way that I've heard people say not since World War II, or have we seen this kind of shared disruption? And it makes sense to me that for those that are most impacted, to your point before, that you will know best what's relevant, what's not, what the real problems are versus narratives that other people create with their own motivations or for their own reasons. So the work, to your point earlier, the work that we've been able to do as part of the global youth mobilization has been really neat, because I do, like you, I feel like the YWCA has been able to share some framing and angles and contribute and push back or encourage around issues of youth leadership and the value and of that in a way that shows that we've been doing this work for a long time. I really wound around there.
Yeah.
I hope I answered your question. I thought it was predictable, but I also thought it was remarkable during the WHO press conference. Was that last week, on the COVID, on the pandemic, but then specifically WHO naming the Global Youth Mobilization Initiative. And someone during the Q&A period, someone said, well, what do you have to say to the fact that it's youth that have been spreading the virus? And really was shifting and pushing back on the narrative of the global youth mobilization, pushing back on the narrative that youth know what's best and can lead us in proper response. So again, it was predictable but remarkable in that I do think that there's such a narrative that we have about youth that's negative, and I largely don't get it. I'm not exactly sure where that's coming from. I even think about my family of origin, I'm like, is this where do we get these notions of youth being problem versus youth being solution?
I think it's one of those ideals, like gender injustices and gender stereotypes, that's just stuck with us through all these generations. And there has been some form of so I'm a marketing major, so I generally believe that marketing has the power to shape the world because I think that's what we've seen with gender equality and like all these years of these misogynistic stereotypes have been spread through different ads or different posters or different things that we say offhandedly or whatever. And I think with young people, it's the same thing. It's like we've been conditioned to believe these things because it's been marketed that way for so long. And it
Mhm.
still is, to be honest, in some things. And I think that's kind of the key to the biggest problems of the world because even when it comes to racial justice and to all of the big problems that we have in the world right now, if we don't make sure that we're sensitive about the information that we're putting out there, especially to younger children, what type of information that they're absorbing, it's very hard for us to see in what shape that they will, in what way they'll be shaped in the future, and what decisions that they will make.
I'm really intrigued by your point about marketing and messaging and how powerful that is, and especially for really young people. And it makes me think, um, you know, what could we do with young people when they're really, really young to instead have them be, don't speak until spoken to,
Mm.
or being, condescended to, even with love, condescended to, like, instead, what does it look like to raise leaders in homes, regardless of region or family norms, regardless of patriarchy, regardless of generational norms? What could that look like? So you have to come up with a marketing slogan that can, or a marketing plan, a message plan that can speak to all regions of the world, be translated into every language, and take into account cultural norms and societal norms. I'm just teasing, but I guess in a perfect world, we would be able to do that. But until then, we just have to keep practicing intergenerational leadership and making our mistakes, but then having great successes too.
Yeah. I think, yeah, even if in a perfect world, that would definitely be possible. But in an imperfect world like the one we're living in, I think movements and initiatives such as the Global Youth Mobilization have such a big power to do something like this, to connect youth from every region, from everywhere, to translate information into different languages, to make it accessible for youth from different parts of the world, from different experiences, different environments. And I think that has an impact to it, a very positive impact that we can see coming from there. I think, yeah, I think there's hope there.
Yeah, you make a good point. You're right. Yeah, no, you make a good point. And there's a lot in the design of this initiative that takes into account the possibility instead of what has been. Ooh,
Yeah.
that gets me excited. So before we wrap up, I have a question for you, and I'm so eager to hear your answer. So one of the things that I thought about as I knew we were going to have this conversation was, how do we thank the leaders within the YWCA that make such an impact? Like, when I look back on the last 25 years and I think about the women who opened doors for me, opened them again when I tripped over the entranceway, who really just exceptionally supported me. I feel stuck. Like, how do I thank them? How do we impart on leaders, whether they're younger than us or older than us or the same age as us? How do we really authentically name that and celebrate that with them? And it comes to mind with World YWCA Day, because that's what we're trying to do. What do you do? How do you try to really communicate to someone and say thank you, or acknowledge or celebrate what they've done in their leadership to support your leadership?
Mm, mm, I think that's a very valuable question for the situation that we're in right now. Um, Personally, I think that we should thank everyone ever who's ever been in our lives, the good and the bad, because they've impacted our lives one way or another. We wouldn't be the people we are today without both the positive and the negative. It's important to see that leaders of different age groups, of different backgrounds, of whatever, all of us have something that brought us together, and that is the YWCA movement. And we have to understand that there is value in whatever wisdom that comes from, no matter what generation you're from or what work that you've done. It's just it's about legacy, and it's about, I don't know how to put it or how to frame it into words, but I think it's a it's very valuable to see that each generation has their own thing to give, and that could be an advice and in whatever way, but there's always a way for us to contribute, and as long as we're contributing, we're part of that movement. And yeah, I guess I don't know. Did that make any sense at all? You can say no, it's fine.
I did. I followed you, and I also yes, I followed you, and I also hear that the power of just simply saying thank you, which is where you started, and acknowledging all the different ways and manifestations of support that come from other leaders, and saying thank you for it. And with that, I would like to thank you, Meti. I'm so glad we not only got to meet in Ethiopia, but that now we have the beginning of our own kind of Meti and Casey story. And I very much have learned a lot from you, and I look forward to learning a lot from you. And I felt supported by you, and that's really, really tremendously important and valuable. So thank you, and happy World YWCA Day.
Thank you very, very much. I would like to pass that forward as well. Thank you for being there and for being supportive throughout all the decisions. And sometimes I know that I can be very stubborn, and thank you for going along with that. And thank you for being such an amazing leader and for completely reshaping the World YWCA and everything. So in general, happy World YWCA Day to you as well. And yeah.
Okay, well, I'll see you this weekend at the Global Youth Mobilization all weekend long.
Yes. All 3 days. Yes.
That's it. Okay. Thanks, Meti.
Thank you.